Who are you? Isn't that the most fundamental question you could ask? How do you answer such a deep question? I believe you have to go all the way back to the beginning, to Genesis. See, if God creates, then you are a prized sculpture, a work of art. You are also a creator in the image of God who creates. But if all of this just happened through a series of cosmic accidents, then, well, doesn't that just make you an accident? Just looking for something interesting to attach your identity to, wandering aimlessly, seeking pleasure and fulfillment? You see, respecting the beginning matters. If you respect the beginning, you respect a creator who makes you who you are. But Genesis has fallen on bad times. I've met many people who've given up on God's explanation of creation as too primitive or limiting or not scientific enough. Today, I want to give you some reasons to respect Genesis. In so doing, help you gain back some of your own precious identity. The first reason I want to give you to respect Genesis is because the Genesis account tracks our available evidence. See, the idea that the universe has a beginning, that's from Genesis. See, the normal thinking was that everything has always existed, like it's in a steady state, everything is just eternal. But the idea that the universe had a beginning, that's from Genesis. Genesis also describes light as the first of all creation. But this concept of light not being fundamental wasn't obvious. 5th and 6th century BC Hindus saw light as something like we think of atoms today, very fundamental to everything, but always existing. Aristotle in the 5th century thinking was similar. He thought of everything as being created through 4 fundamental elements of air, water, fire, and earth. But all these 4 elements were always eternally existing. See, Genesis said everything was made, and it was man and his explanations that got it wrong. In addition, our available evidence shows that the universe was created at a specific time. Well, the fact that the universe started at a certain time, this can only be explained by a personality choosing this time versus another time. See, if you have an infinite mathematical understanding of the universe, you can't explain why the universe started when it did. All you're left with is continuous cycles of creation followed by destruction, creation followed by destruction. But the idea that the universe just started at a certain time requires a personality to intervene and start it. So we see the available evidence is that's exactly what's shown when we look at how the universe was started. The Genesis record tracks our available evidence when it comes to the fossil record also. Stephen Jay Gould, a prominent archaeologist, has said the extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and at the nodes of their branches. The rest is inference, however reasonable, not the evidence of fossils. We also see in what's called the Precambrian explosion, just that the earliest forms of life just all of a sudden appear. There's no transitions, there's nothing but just a sudden onslaught of a large variety of animalia. And what this shows us is, once again, is consistent with what Genesis tells us, that God created everything we see. The second reason I want to give you to respect Genesis is the Genesis account actually tracks our modern observations. See, in a lot of ways, God has gifted us with Genesis. Modern observations show that time itself is relative. In other words, we can't measure time the way we think because it's relative to the observer. Genesis makes it clear to us that the earth was created, that the universe was created in 6 days, and on the 7th day that God rested. Well, those 24-hour days, since science has proven that time is relative to the observer, those 24-hour periods could be 24 periods of time for man's experience, but could be a vastly different amount of time from the perspective of God. We don't know if that's true or not, but we see that Genesis is not afraid to use time in a way that maybe wouldn't make sense to most people until our modern observations. The Genesis account also fits our modern observations about what we call the Big Bang. See, the Big Bang necessitates a time when the laws of physics were different. At 10 to the minus 44th seconds from when the Big Bang, quote, when the universe began, all the laws of physics, there's none of them that exist. In other words, it's a dirty little secret of physics, but when at the first instant, when the universe was created, there's no physics. In other words, the speed of light, what light? There's no such thing. There's no speed of light. But the rate of expansion could be near infinite. And then it only takes 10 to the minus 44 seconds for the entire universe to spread out. So then if you try to apply steady state physics all the way back, which again is a dirty little secret, you can't actually apply steady state physics all the way back. Then if you can't apply them backwards, then you realize that, hey, you know, Genesis actually describes something that is very, very possible as far as the existence of everything that we see. God makes it very clear that in 6 days God worked. What was he doing? Well, perhaps he was bending the laws of physics on each of those days. Maybe he bent the laws of physics so that life itself could exist. But now we're living in the 7th day when all the laws of physics are steady state. The third reason I want to give you to respect the Genesis account is because the Genesis account explains everything. See, it doesn't just explain the physical, it also explains the metaphysical. See, science by definition studies things that are physical, but it can't really explain things like love, justice, sacrifice, friendship, communication, even consciousness. The fact that you and I are listening to each other. These are all ultimately meaningless to science. These are just means of survival, chemicals trying to stay together. But why are they even trying to survive? See, but Genesis provides us an understanding that love is meaningful, justice is meaningful, sacrifice is meaningful, and somehow deep down inside we know that these things are real, these things are true, they're not just apparitions. Science can't explain these things, but Genesis makes it clear because a God who has these qualities created the universe that we see. So Genesis rings true in the metaphysical as well as the physical. Okay, so I've given you 3 reasons to respect Genesis. 1, because Genesis tracks our available evidence. 2, because Genesis fits our modern observations. And 3, because Genesis gives us an understanding of the physical as well as the metaphysical. You know, Psalm 139 says it perfectly. It says, I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. I want you to write Psalm 139 on a mirror. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And every time you read it, place your trust in the Lord who gave you a perfect and respectable account of everything. Remind yourself of your personal value. You are designed with a purpose, and let that speak into your identity.